Y'all, the weekend trainings have got to go. There, I said it. Let's get into why. Okay, so I've talked about this in a previous video. The history of the weekend doula training was so that nurses and occupational therapists and respiratory therapists, like folks that were already working within, social work, care work, the medical system, that they could go in and expand their understanding to support folks as they were, going through their pregnancy, their birth, in those first few hours. What do I think of my glasses? I haven't decided yet. I'm rapidly going blind, so I've got a lot of glasses on the go. Let me know in the comments what you think about this. Okay, so back to the history. So that was the idea around the weekend training, but then suddenly people who are like, I'm a barista and now I want to be a doula, or I work in marketing and now I want to be a doula, or I don't want to go back to my corporate job, now I want to be a doula. And so then these people started going into the weekend training. But y'all, the people who first started doing the weekend trainings, they already had a foundation in care work and trauma-informed care, hopefully, in, some of these anti-oppressive frameworks, hopefully. But for sure, they did understand the basics around anatomy and physiology and the stages and phases of labor. So they didn't have to learn that. They got to learn like the next level because they already had that foundation. But now people are coming in without that foundation, and the weekend trainings did not change. They were just like, we'll just jam all of that in. So you're trying to learn this foundation plus all the skills that you would have as a doula. Okay, so there's something called practice-based care. And that's when you go into the hospital and everybody's like, oh, everybody gets Pitocin, or like everybody births on their back, or like that's just the way we do it. That's called practice-based care. And doulas are in there to like shake it up and go with evidence-based care. So the evidence shows that this is the criteria you should have Pitocin. Otherwise, no, we shouldn't introduce Pitocin. Evidence shows that birthing on your back is actually not a great position for a multitude of reasons. One is it brings the tailbone in. It actually creates the smallest pelvic outlet because people aren't just on their back. They're told to pull their knees to their chest. They're holding their breath. They're doing something called purple pushing or the Valsalva maneuver. Don't worry, I'm going to bring it back to weekend trainings. And so folks are in like the least ideal stage. The baby has to actually go up rather than working with gravity. It's not great. We know this. We know this from anatomy, from physiology, and from a mountain of research. But yet, most folks are still guided to be put on their back. So that's called practice-based care. What I'm proposing is that the weekend training model is practice-based education. It's just like, well, we've always done it this way. Now, there are organizations like Bebo Mia, and we are not the only one. There's a handful of us out there, very small amount, that are committed to providing longer trainings that are significantly longer than a weekend. Okay, because a weekend training, when you're doing this doula work, it requires excellent judgment. It requires understanding of trauma-informed care, hopefully an anti-oppressive lens, but that's not a priority for everybody, even though, in my opinion, it should be, but that's my opinion. You need to have evidence-based training because that's the very purpose of what we're doing. You need to have emotional regulation because there's a lot of things that happen when you're supporting families. There's little t traumas, there's big T traumas, there's like working through our own stuff that we have as, how we were parented or how we parent. Like, it's very complicated. So you need to unlearn and relearn some tools to support you through emotional regulation because you need to always be regulated so that you can support your clients. You need to be adaptable. Stuff's always changing. It would be great if it was like the plans went to plan. That doesn't always happen. So adaptability is a really important skill that you need to learn and develop. So is non-judgmental care, removing ourselves from outcomes, like all of this stuff. Those skills take a lot of time to develop. So again, going back to, you have to develop these skills because these are the skills of a doula. But if you're learning about the stages and phases of labor and, basic anatomy, that's most of your weekend, or it should be, for you to have a great understanding of how it all works. Okay. So again, the role of a doula is to fight against practice-based care. And yet we're doing practice-based education for the majority of folks in the field. If a hospital, for example, if they were rushing your birth, we understand that that's like something that doulas are in there trying to go up against. But yet most of the major doula training organizations are rushing your education, which is the very thing that we don't want. Okay, let's talk about doulas from equity-seeking groups. What does that mean? Those are folks who are racialized or queer or live with disabilities, live in a bigger body, live, under-resourced. Any of these groups of marginalized communities. A lot of us have the lived experience, and we want to go out and we want to serve our communities. We experience, medical racism or homophobia, transphobia, lack of accommodations for disabilities, all of these things. And so we're drawn to these trainings because we're like, oh, we want to go help in our communities. We have the lived experience, we have the passion, we have the fire. And then we're going into these trainings that are not equipping us to actually work within the field, and all the nuances that come from medical racism, from homophobia, from ableism, all of these things that are rampant in the hospital systems or the medical field in general. And so now these birth workers are, they're failing because they're not equipped. And then instead of blaming the system, which in this case is the education system of a weekend training, most of the time we blame ourselves. So we're like, oh, I guess I wasn't cut out to be an entrepreneur. I guess I didn't work hard enough. I'm not smart enough. Like all of these things that we've now take on top of the fact we live with all this oppression. And so, this is happening more and more. How do I know this? Well, I have a doula training organization that attracts a lot of people who felt wildly failed by their weekend trainings. And they come in and they share these stories that are just so heartbreaking because they felt so passionate about this work. And then they're so like, up, I'm so excited, I'm going to my doula training. They like their doula training because they don't know what they don't know. And then they go out in the field and they actually are wildly ill-equipped and unprepared. And so then they fall so far and they're so discouraged. And we need actually more birth workers. The need is going up now that insurance is covering birth workers, doulas, that, we need more people. The insurance providers are slammed because they don't have enough folks that are contracting or credentialing for them. So we actually need really great, trained, well-prepared, confident, competent doulas out there. And so the industry at this point is just kind of quietly assuming that we're going to continue to accept this crappy weekend model. Now, I'm not saying down with weekend trainings. They have a place, but what I would love for weekend trainings so that you all who are considering becoming doulas are actually told, accurate information is weekend doula trainings really should be called info sessions. They should be introductory courses because not only is it pretty quick and dirty with not a lot of context or a lot of content, but then after you don't get a lot of support, if any. I've mentioned in other videos, but I've done 4 weekend trainings. And for 3 of them, I had the same instructor. I have never seen her again. There was no way for me to get a hold of her. I've actually never seen her out in the world, which is weird because I've been very active in the birth worker community for almost 20 years. And I literally never saw her again. Because a lot of these folks travel. And so they come and they do these trainings and then they go off and do another training. And so there's not a lot of this this happened at my last birth. What do I do? Or I'm going to my first consult. What do I have to bring? These very, very simple questions. They're very hard to get those answers. I found it impossible. I couldn't get any of that information. That's why I started building a community, and then my community became more formal, and that's how Babel Mia was born almost 20 years ago. So I don't want to say down with weekend trainings, but weekend trainings need to be presented as just here's info sessions. Here's kind of some high level information to see if you'd like to do this work. And they should be way cheaper, so that they do reflect the fact that this is not a comprehensive, complete training, because y'all, you will have to go out and you will have to do so much education on your own and so many more courses for you to be able to do basic care. So in a weekend, they can't talk about infant feeding. It's just not possible. And if they say like, oh, we have a module on infant feeding, it's going to be the shortest darn module you ever did see, as in like, you can feed from the breast or chest, you can feed combination, or you can feed with a bottle with formula or something else in it. Like you couldn't get into it anymore. There's just like literally not enough time. And so you're going to go out and you're going to get a lactation question, and you will not be able to answer that lactation question, which you'll then be like, oh, now I need to go do a lactation course. And you're going to find that you're going to be like, oh, now I need to go do a sleep course. Oh, now I need to go do a nutrition course. Oh, now I need to go learn about all the questions that your clients are asking you, because you did not learn it in your weekend training. And so it might look really great that this is $900 or $1,300, but by the end of it, you will spend thousands, and you're going to feel really insecure, because when you're only going to discover what you don't know when your clients need you to know it. Now, I don't know everything. I'm very comfortable with saying like, oh, I'm not actually sure. I'll have to get back to you. But those things are few and far between, because I have a really wide, deep knowledge, because my training, this Babel Mia's training, is 18 weeks filled with workshops, courses, classes, activities, like all of these things. So in creating this content and continuing my education, I feel really confident as a doula, as a practicing birth doula out in the world. Okay, so if a weekend doula training isn't enough, what do we need to see in a comprehensive training? These are the must-haves that you need to find in your doula training before you press that register. Let's talk about that next.